Well, tonight, hundreds of supporters packed the lawn at the city-county building to support immigrant rights. The Families Belong Together rally comes on the heels of the border crisis. This weekend, the White House saying more than 2,000 children are still separated from their parents, and the reunions won't happen quickly.
And tonight's event was originally planned because of the global outcry over families being torn apart at the border, and they were protesting the conditions in which the children were being kept.
But as reporter Grant Robinson explains, the rally ended up being about so much more. Grant?
Beth and Brandon, the recent immigration raid in Morristown and the 287G program that allows some Knox County Sheriff's officers to act as federal immigration enforcement were also rallying cries tonight. And for many, it was personal.
What are we going to do?
More than 500 people came out to show their support for immigrant rights. Reverend Daniel Castillo encouraged the crowd.
I know that this is a very complex issue, but we cannot take compassion and love out of the issue.
Even those of different faiths united in their call to treat immigrants with dignity.
I don't really look at it as a matter of faith. I look at it as a matter of humanity. It's just humanity.
For Jerry Savetsky, immigration is intertwined with his family's history. His Jewish grandparents fled Poland at the beginning of World War II. Then he and his parents came to America when he was 15.
And when I see the way people in really similar circumstances are being treated today, right here at our southern border, it just breaks my heart.
Speakers pointed out that America's immigration system had problems well before President Trump took office. But Savetsky says the policies of the current administration would have kept even his parents out.
If immigration was based on Donald Trump merit system, my parents would have never been admitted to this country. They were both factory workers, and when we moved here to New York City when I was a teenager, they ended up getting jobs washing dishes in a hospital.
But now Savetsky and his brother are both engineers, and he says he's living the American dream. A dream he believes is wrong to deny to those seeking a better life.
Now, there were 3 protesters at the event with signs, and one of them trying to disrupt the rally, but they were kept in check by police and blocked from view by signs of those supporting immigrants. Beth, Brandon.
All right, Grant, thank you.